Okay, thank you everyone for being here. It's a real pleasure for me to mediate, moderate, or whatever, start this forum. So in some of these forums we've had panels talking all at the same time. We're going to do it a little differently, having one person talk at a time. We have to get them all in an hour and a half. As you can tell, we're starting a little late. They're all very talkative, so for the best there. So we have three speakers today. The first speaker is going to be David Helm, who's the Science Contest Specialist in Fayette County for the grades K through 12. So he's the one who knows what we're getting in the next 10-15 years. So it'll be very interesting to hear what he has to say about that. He also runs the science fair for Fayette County. So he'll have a lot of interesting, I'm sure he's got tons of great stories about that. Our next speaker is Nathan Vandervoort. Nathan has a variety of titles: Assistant Professor in Toxicology, Assistant Director of Research at the Markey Cancer Center, Director of Administration for the Center of Cancer and Metabolism. Correct me when you come up if I get anything wrong. And Assistant Dean for Academic Development in the College of Medicine. And he has a very interesting specialty or expertise in the current job market for STEM majors and what we as educators need to do to train them to get the jobs that are available. And then our last speaker, Martha Peterson, is a professor in microbiology, immunology, and genetics. She's a senior associate vice president for research. She also served as a National Science Foundation program manager. And she certainly has a lot of perspective on what these younger generations are going to have to go through to become scientists. So, without further ado, David.
Good morning, everybody. Do I need the mic? Can you all hear me?
Yes, you need it because it's
we're recording. Okay. Okay, let me go ahead and pull the presentation here. As I'm doing this, I'll just kind of follow up with the introduction. My name is David Helm, and I am the K-12 Science Specialist for Fayette County Public Schools, which means basically I deal with all 67 of our schools and programs, all 44,000 kids, and about 800 teachers who do science. So it's quite a bit to have on their plate. But the nice thing is with me, I'm one of those people who went into education as an alternate kind of career. I didn't start teaching until my first career was done. I've been in education now for about 25 years. Of those, 14 were in the classroom. And the one thing that I can tell you, see, can you fix that?
If you click on display settings, change it to
the one thing that I can tell you is the kids are indeed changing. Education as a practice isn't changing as fast as the kids are. I'll be the first to tell you that. And having two kids of my own who have gone through the system, one who has gone through UK, now works at Chandler as a nurse. The other one is currently here in the pre-nursing program. They're each very different. And as we go through this, I want you to understand that these are very much holistic descriptions of the kids and of the generations we're talking about. Everybody knows you're either your own kids, grandkids, nephews, nieces, and whatnot. Oh, well, that's not my kid. And that could be the point, but this is in general. So as we go through this, and the clicker's not working, okay. As we go through this, we'll take a look at first ourselves and we're very big in this country on naming generations, and myself, I'm a baby boomer, and I'm a classic baby boomer. We go back to the generation before that, silent generation, what we call the Generation X, Next Gens, and then Generation Z. The current generation coming up then is Generation Alpha. I don't know how they came up with that. But typically everybody in here can relate to one of those types of classifications. So for Generation Z, you know, your freshmen, sophomores now, the kids coming up through the system now, exactly who are they? How are they going to be different from students we've had in the past? Are they going to be different from students we've had in the past? And first off, they were born between 1995 and 2010, in general. Okay? That's the age group we're looking at. Currently, there are 65 million of them in the United States. That's the largest generation population in the U.S. now. That's a bunch of people. The good news is that means there are a lot of people coming up to the system to take care of me when I get older and I retire. The scary thing is that I had some of those kids in class, and they're going to be taking care of me when I get older. So, just so you know. And that's always been one of my big things when I was in the classroom as an anatomy and physiology instructor. The day that I walked into a doctor's office and there's one of my former students, is kind of a scary feeling. It's like, oh my goodness. I don't know if I'm ready for this or not. But no, the ones that have gone through have done very, very well. Very proud of them. In first world nations, there are about 275 million globally. In total global population, 1.6 million, or 1.6 billion, I'm sorry. That's a lot of people. It's a very large generational group. And they've experienced some things that have been very, very different. The names that you're going to see them that they go by, or they go by the silent generation, internet generation, iGeneration, Generation Now, and the Google generation. And that probably, to me, in the experience I've had with kids, that's the best descriptor of them. I'll never forget the day I walked into a classroom. The student said that I have stories. Oh, I've got stories, and I've got to make sure to keep this time-wise where we belong. We were working with our teachers and trying to work with them on the idea of authenticity in education and how just because a kid can look something up doesn't mean they know it or doesn't mean they understand it. So I walked into a second grade classroom and wrote the name of a hormone up on the board. And I told the kids, I give you $1 if you can tell me what this is. Immediately, 3 or 4 of the kids pull their phones out, Google it, boom, give them $1. Okay. That fast. They had no clue what that hormone did. They had no idea what the structure was. They could see the structure on their phone, but it didn't mean anything to them. But it was the answer. So that's the kind of kids that we're dealing with, and they're very, very much that mindset. Okay. Having kids growing up through this, a lot of times I'll hear older folks, adults like myself, say how kids are so impatient these days and they can't focus on anything. That they're just boom, 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 boom. And I really will disagree with them because I've got a son who's now 22. And he was the kid who was, if on the surface, he very much was one of the ADD kids. I mean, I was referred to him as squirrel moments. We'd be going on somewhere and boom, squirrel. And he's just off track. But you put him down in front of a video game, and he would sit there for hours. And it wasn't just one of the mindless Mario Kart kind of video games. There were strategy video games. There were creativity video games that he would sit there and work for hours. So I didn't buy into that whole, he can't sit there for more than 5 minutes, because he could. He really could. Some of the things that they've been through a lot. Their whole life, they've had to deal with the idea of global warming. They've heard it their whole life. And you look at some of the predictions of global warming, they're scary. And a lot of times we don't give our kids credit enough for the thought that they put into things. Keep in mind, these kids are probably some of the best informed kids in the world. They know more about what's going on in a global perspective than we give them credit for. When there's an issue that happens geopolitically, I can ask my son, and he's typically pretty well informed about what's going on. And he's not what I would call one of those big geopolitical nerd kind of guys, but he just follows his feeds. He's always on his phone, he's always coming out, he's always seeing what's going on. He can tell you what's happening. Now, the nice thing about that with his education, that's what drives his informational base. On the flip side, the problem with that we're finding is, whereas the kids access information very, very quickly, they don't analyze it very, very quickly. They take it for face value. And that's a huge issue. The idea that if it's on the internet, it's true, is very much a very real issue that we deal with. And from an educational perspective, we'll have situations where kids will come up with, oh, well, I found this on the internet, and it doesn't even make sense. But because of the source, they're very much, oh, well, gosh, it's got to be true. Okay. They've grown up in a world of terror alerts. Various colors, reds, yellows, oranges. I remember taking my son through airports, and the signs would be posted. Now we're in orange, now we're in yellow, now we're in red. And for us, it's like, yeah, okay, life goes on, we get that. But for a kid who grows up in that situation, that's a constant, ongoing pressure that they deal with. And a lot of times they don't want to sit down with you and say, oh, well, gosh, let's talk about this terror alert today. But they hear it. It's continuous. And then also, they've had to work through the situation where parents have gone through an economic crisis that was tough. We had a big downturn years ago, which the past year has been fine. But when these kids were growing up, they were very tough economic situations. And for many of our kids growing up, this is the first generation that as they see themselves being less successful financially than their parents, which is really interesting. But they've also, because they've grown up in this situation, they're also tend to be, and I know if you guys have kids, you're going to find this hard to believe, they're economically more conservative. Rather than wanting to go spend all the money at the mall, that's not this generation. My daughter, who's a millennial, doesn't get economic conservatism at all. My son, and I gave another great story. He's a student here in the UK, so it shows up in my house the other day, and he comes in the house to wash or do his laundry. And he calls me in the office and says, hey, Dad, how do you wash your shower curtain? Well, you wash it. You put it in the washing machine. He goes, well, you got any bleach? I said, why do you need bleach? Well, there's some mold on it. Well, and it's three guys living in a house, so I immediately thought, oh my gosh, I can only imagine what that shower curtain looks like. I said, son, tell you what, why don't I just go out and buy you a new shower curtain? That's kind of nasty. And his response was, Dad, those are expensive. That's the generation that we're dealing with. He sees that thing, or sees that type of issue, which for me is like, oh, I wonder where that came from. But I got a new shower curtain because it was really nasty. The bleach didn't work. So as we work with the Generation Z kids, and I've done this in a comparative type of role, I won't read each one of these to you, but in education and in life in general, we look at reward systems. What is it that will motivate our kids? Or what is it that will motivate our employees? Or in my case, my teacher, what gets them going? And it really is because I work with adults who are from 22 to mid-60s, I deal with all these, and it's very, very different how I'll deal with teachers. My young teachers, I struggle to work with because I didn't grow up in that era. I've been out of the classroom for a while now, so it represents a new challenge to me. But with our Generation Z kids, their reward system has to be very flexible. It has to change depending on the situation that you're trying to motivate them to do. And if you go with the idea of that's the way their world operates, it's very quick, very, very fast-paced. And you'll see later, the attention span for a Generation Z student, about 8 seconds. 8 seconds. If you don't have their attention within 8 seconds, they're off to something else. Okay? That's how quick they are to move on. When you think of the traditional classroom situation, holy cow. And it's interesting, I never forget when my daughter was getting ready to come here as a freshman. And I was touring the campus with her and took her over to Whitehall and went to one of the big lecture halls. And I spent a lot of time in those lecture halls, near and dear to my heart. But I walked in and I was shocked and appalled. Because when I walked in, there were these rows of students sitting out with their laptops and their iPads and their Chromebooks or whatever electronic device they had, and some of them weren't even paying attention. I was appalled. I grew up in a classroom of you sit there with your notebook and you scribble and write notes as fast as you can, then you run back to your room and recopy them so they're legible. The kids nowadays, everything's uploaded for them in PowerPoint. They go to whatever web-based program you're using or Canvas or classroom management system you're using. Download the PowerPoint, download the notes, and we'll read along with you maybe. That's very, very different for our kids. And to get them to do that is tough. One of the things we find with kids also, that anytime they have an electronic device open, there's a minimum of 3 windows that are open. So whereas your class may be projected on their laptop, when you look down at the bar, there's probably 3 or 4 other things going on there. And they're responding to them. They're very much multitaskers. It's kind of crazy how to do it. I can't do that. I wasn't raised that way. For me, I am the one, I'll get distracted by other things and so on, so I just, one window at a time, and I'm good with that. Okay. With their work styles, you know, it's really interesting. Our generation of kids are connected constantly, at all times. If you go out to any classroom, if you go out to any place where they eat, if you go out to any social gathering, and this blows my mind as an adult, how can you have a group of kids in a social setting who's sitting there on their electronic devices, totally ignoring people around them? It appears. Oftentimes they're sitting and texting each other. It's the craziest thing in the world. That I can come to this table, and rather than carrying on a conversation, we'll just text one another. But that's what they're comfortable with. That's how they operate. Okay? It fits their style, and their communication is typically 140 characters or less. And that's how they communicate. And what we're really seeing that now is in the interviewing process with teachers, or with new teachers, their interviewing skills are terrible. Their interpersonal skills are very, very weak because they're not used to it. This is a generation where if you give them a phone call, they're offended. They don't have time for that. That's not the way they communicate. Email, it's too much time. Now, with my generation, we live and die by email. It's continuous. It's nonstop. Generation Z, they tweet. They do Instagram. Very, very quick, very, very short ideas. So in the workplace or in the educational setting, that's what's going on with them. They take technology and use it in ways that I can't imagine. I learned very, very quickly as a teacher, back in the days when PowerPoint first came out, that if I wanted to do a PowerPoint, I would have my kids do it for me. Did that for a couple of reasons. One, they knew it better than me, and their growth curve, or their curve of acquisition of information was much higher than mine. They were very comfortable with it. You look at older people who are scared of technology. We're afraid we're going to break it. This generation, they have no fear. They're not afraid of anything. And if they break it, they'll fix it. It's really kind of interesting working with them. With them, they like to do things better. They figure it out and they want to take it to the next level. They figure out they want to take it to the next level. And they do this very much, and they're learning all the time, which is really kind of fun with them. Very, very different from my generation where with our work style, we like to work with other people, kind of sort of, depending on the situation. The Gen Xers, they're just saying, I'm going to get it down and do it by myself. Okay. But because kids are so connected now with each other, everything's ongoing and it's continuous. So have they really changed? Absolutely. They're absolutely more confident with technology, and they're getting more and more confident with it. They use it in ways that we never would have thought of. With my son, he's in the military also, in addition to going to school. And he's very much a gun enthusiast, and it's a World War II type gun that he really, really likes. So one year for Christmas, I went out and bought him a World War II, some Russian rifle. And it was typically Russian surplus material, so it was kind of beat up and kind of dirty and so on. But it wasn't cheap. So I gave it to him for Christmas, and I was so proud of myself that I knew that's what he wanted, and he was excited about it. And I came home the day after Christmas, and I walked into my shop, and there is his brand new gun, this antique firearm, totally disassembled in pieces on my workbench. And I was like, holy crap. You didn't just do that. Because there are pieces there I had no idea. And it's like, the weapons that he uses are not Russian weapons. How did you know how to do that? He goes, oh, Dad, I just looked on YouTube. And that's exactly what he did in a 24-hour period. I figured out how to completely disassemble this thing and not break it, clean everything up, and he actually put it back together the following day and only had one piece backwards in it. And that was because the YouTube video he was using put it in backwards. Because he had to get on another YouTube video to find out why it didn't work. That's how our kids learn. It's amazing. Anything they want to learn, they can learn. As an 8th grader, I was in my office one day, my son calls me, hey Dad, do we have any aluminum foil and Drano? For those of you who know a little bit of chemistry, we call that a bomb. That's exactly what that is. And I don't know how he learned about it, I don't know where it came from, but it was a YouTube thing. And he and his friends were going to get this stuff while I was still at work and go out in my backyard to see if it really, really works. And yes, it really, really works. So I told him, no, of course we don't have Drano. Why don't we have Drano? That's crazy. Right? They're very much, they do everything digitally. Their communication, it's digital. And dealing with the kids, that's what we've got to keep in mind. With my new teachers, I'm amazed at the number of teachers that will text me and then expect a response immediately. Or they'll, God forbid, they'll email me. And then they'll call and say, I emailed you an hour ago. Why haven't you responded? It's like, because I was working. I was busy. But that's the world, that's the Generation Z world. Very, very quick, very quick to respond to things. And they multitask in everything. Everything. Right? With my son and his girlfriend, or my daughter and her boyfriend, it never ceases to amaze me. We'll take them out to eat, and they'll be sitting at the table. I'll be trying to carry on a conversation. I'm a pretty traditional guy. You know, I grew up on that 5 o'clock dinner kind of thing. The family sat there and we talked about your day. No, with my kids, they text about their day, or they're doing, I don't know what they're doing. They're not texting me during the day. Their learning preferences, with the Generation Z folks, they like traditional, but they like the technology incorporated into it. With them, they also very much are visual learners. And you look at the way they communicate, it's very much with icons and symbols. So as we're working with them, any way we can incorporate that into our education, we need to keep that in mind. Okay? It's that short attention span. How long does it take you to read a paragraph versus to look at a picture that depicts the same information? It's that type of mindset with them. With attitudes towards authority, I love this one. So much, with me being a baby boomer, I was very much the guy that, okay, yeah, I'll respect you, but you're going to have to earn it. Okay, I was raised in a very traditional family, and respect was given based on position, but it wasn't retained based on position. You could be have this title, have this ranking, but if you did something to show me otherwise, I would lose that respect. That's changed a little bit. With our Generation Z kids, their I guess the way they deal with authority is they're high maintenance. They will wear you out. It's really kind of fun to deal with my young teachers, nonstop. You know, I've got teachers that will contact me 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. And keep in mind, I'm not in the buildings with them every day. I've got 800 teachers. I mean, we've got 800 teachers contacting me 5 times a week. That's 4,000 contacts a week. That's nuts. Okay, that's absolutely nuts. But fortunately, it's only my younger teachers that do that. My older teachers just leave me alone. You know, we know what to do. You can't tell us anything. But with the kids we have in our classrooms today, they very much want that instant feedback. It's ongoing, it's instantaneous, and it's very high maintenance with them. Okay? Some of that is driven by their parents. It's really interesting. We refer to them as helicopter parents. The ones that just don't hover over the kids. To make sure that everything's going right for the kids. Make sure they're getting what they need. Okay? Some of those parents are great, some of them are a little intense, but we'll take all the parent involvement we can get. Okay? With their learning styles, absolutely they're digital innovators. These kids love to create. Right? They want to make things. With my son, I'll never forget, he was probably 12 years old, and, oh gosh, Minecraft, what was the game that he would play. And I never really understood, but I'm not a big video game. I never was a big video game. I could do Mario Kart as long as I had a steering wheel, but other than that, yeah, I'm terrible. He tried to teach me the shoot 'em up games. Well, I would want to read the directions, and now by that time they didn't come with directions. The directions were online. And there would be all these buttons to push, and I wanted to understand it. He's like, no, Dad, you just go. You jump in and you go. So with me, he thought it was hilarious because I typically got shot about every 4 to 5 seconds. Not a good time for me. But with these guys, it's all digital. No matter what they do, they want to create things, they want to make things. With his Minecraft thing, I'll never forget, I walked in, and it's kind of like electronic Legos. It's kind of what it reminded me of. But he made this domain, for lack of a better term, in this building that had a labyrinth of passages and hidden dungeons and indoor swimming pools and all this other stuff. And he called me to his room to show me, and he took me through this thing. And here I am looking at a two-dimensional screen. And he's taking his mouse, just running me through this thing. I'm about ready to throw up. I'm like, oh man, this is just messing with my head. But for him, he created it, so he took that two-dimensional image, but was viewing it three-dimensional in his head. That's what these kids can do. And it becomes very, very natural to them. Even down to our youngest. I've got a great nephew. I guess he's a great nephew. I'll never forget, he went up to my TV screen last time he was down and tried to change it by rubbing it. I was watching something he didn't want to watch. And so he went to the screen and was like, I'm like, what the heck? And I thought maybe there's dust. No, it wasn't dust. He didn't want to watch what I was watching, what it was. Okay? Their worlds are borderless. This is such a neat thing with our kids. Their knowledge of geography isn't great, as far as being able to point to things on the map. But their knowledge of where people are from is much broader than it's ever been. With that online gaming mindset, these kids typically participate in groups. And with my kids, it was not common in their games. They would be competing with kids, in Kentucky, in Indiana, in California, in Nepal. It's all over the place. That's their world. They don't know borders. And so sometimes for them, this whole terrorism thing is a challenge. It's kind of a struggle. And we'll go through some of the other ones. The communication, we've talked about it, typically very, very brief. Like I said, 140 characters. And to give you an idea, I walked into a classroom yesterday. And in education, we're very, very big on instructional outcomes. What we want the kids to learn in that particular study, either that day, the next couple of days, and so on. Called instructional outcomes. The instructional outcome heading for us traditionalists, we would say learning target, instructional outcome, instructional objective, some formal title. His was hashtag what we be doing. And I walked in there and I thought, well, that's just inappropriate. No, the kids love that. I talked to the kids about that. And they're like, yeah, he gets it. And that's what those kids responded to. I never would come up with hashtag what we be doing for my class. Now I'm going to come up with some other kind of thing. But that's the way our kids work and so on. Come on, there we go. With our communication, when we communicate with kids, we've got to keep in mind the language. Not to say that text vernacular is appropriate. Okay? Being into education, of course, we give assessments, and many of our assessments, kids will have some sort of written response, and you'll see things like IDK or WTF. Okay? That's not appropriate vernacular. And we use those moments to work with those kids. But that's the way they think. And I found I think the other day, there's a periodic table of texting. And it had all these different abbreviations. Some of them I had no idea. Asked my kids about it, I'm like, well, yeah, Dad. What's wrong with you? All right. Real quickly, here's some of the characteristics. One of the neat things about it is shopping. In Harvard Chester, Lord Taylor is downsizing because of the online market. Our kids shop online almost continuously. That's the way they think. And with me, I was so excited last year when I got Amazon Prime. Not only do I get free shipping and TV, but it's, I just sit on my computer and do all my Christmas shopping. It took me a long time to get used to that. I wasn't comfortable. I still don't pay bills online. And my nephew's like, okay, you're gonna not pay your bill online because you're afraid somebody might hack your account, but you're gonna put a check with all your banking information number on it in the mail. It's like, yeah. Okay. That's the way they think. They don't see that kind of thing. Their attention span, like 0 to 8 seconds. We used to say that working with young people, the attention span was about equivalent to their year in school. So if we're looking at a 6th grader, you've got about 6 minutes. If you're looking at a high school student, you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes. Before you need to transition, we need to do something different for them. 8 seconds. And in that 8 seconds, they're going to decide whether they're going to listen to you, pay attention to you, or not. And they'll make that conscious choice to do that. That's why they have those 3 windows open on their computers. Okay? All right, so, and we're just going to go down to the final thoughts with them. We'll get them all up here. With our Generation Z kids, they can be tough. But what I've found, probably the most successful way in dealing with them, is to let them run. They want to run. They just need a little guidance. They want us to point them in the direction to go, and then just wind them up and let them go. It is absolutely amazing what they'll come up with. In the science world, we have a new set of science standards that are very much geared towards the kids doing science and engineering practices and looking at phenomena and making sense of those phenomena in their world. And that's a scary place for teachers to go because we've not done that before. It's the same when we deal with college-age students or new employees. They're in the same group. Just to stand back and keep them from falling off the road and point them in the right direction, but they're going to build that road and that path as they get there. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. I'll not do questions now just because I've got speakers behind me. So, well, I guess we'll do questions at the end too.
Yeah, if there's time, we'll do some questions at the end, but we want to make sure we get enough time for each of the 3 speakers. So let's thank
Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but that was fascinating to me. So, my parents are baby boomers, and I'm a Generation Xer, and I have 2 small kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. 6-year-old's in 1st grade here at Fayette County Public Schools. So I could relate to that talk on many different levels. And to show my Generation Xness, I'm going to keep time on my phone versus a watch. So my talk today is going to be very different than what you just heard. Before I get started, I'd like to know a little bit more about who I'm talking to. So who's affiliated with UK in the room? Most everybody? Okay. Are you staff members? Okay. Any other faculty in the room? Okay. So my talk's going to be very different. I'm going to talk about preparing the next generation of STEM professionals. And I'm going to talk mostly about training PhDs, but I think that some of my key recommendations for how we should be preparing our future STEM professionals can be applied to individuals seeking bachelor's degrees and master's degrees as well. So before I get started, I want to tell a leadership story about how leadership through the generations in the STEM field really is impactful. So I'm a 2-time alumnus of UK, and as an undergraduate here, I was an agriculture biotechnology major, and I took a graduate level chemistry class when I was a junior or senior, I don't remember which. And none other than Dr. Testa was the professor of that course.
I remember it well.
And it's interesting because that course and several others were part of the reason why I decided to go to graduate school. And it's very likely the reason why I'm standing here today giving this talk. So the people who are our teachers and professors really have a great impact on the people that you're interacting with, your students, and you really can shape their career trajectory. Okay, so the premise that I want to start with in giving this talk is that the way that we're currently training, particularly PhDs, is flawed. And the reason I say that, I have several reasons for why I say that, and I'll get into those reasons. And that premise is that for generations, we've trained PhDs to be future faculty at major institutions such as this. And I think that we need to challenge and eventually change that paradigm. And the reasons for that I'll get into in the next several slides. So I'm going to be talking about national data, and any faculty in the room. This may or may not be representative of the outcome data in your department or in your college, but it's national trends. So for generations, we've trained significantly more PhDs than there are faculty positions available, and that's illustrated here in this slide. These trends are for doctoral trainees in the life sciences and engineering disciplines. And the top two solid blue and yellow or orange, depending on your color blindness scale, are the number of doctoral recipients in these fields. The bottom two lines, the dotted lines, are the number of faculty appointments in those same disciplines over the same period of time. And what you immediately see is there's a huge gulf between the number of doctoral recipients and the number of faculty appointments. So, reason number one that I believe we need to change the premise of the way we train PhDs is because we're training PhDs for faculty positions that don't overall exist. Reason number two, doctoral students' interest in an academic career changes significantly while they're in graduate school. And that's shown here in this slide. A recent study by Michael Roach and Henry Sauerman, they did a longitudinal cohort study of about 800 graduate students in PhD programs at almost 40 institutions. They asked these students at the beginning of their graduate school experience what their interest in an academic career is, and then three years later they asked them the same question. What you can see on the slide is that at the beginning of the study, 80% of these 800 and something graduate students said they were interested in an academic career. Just 3 years later, however, that dropped to 55%. So that's a huge, significant difference in the number of students that are interested in pursuing an academic career. What's also interesting is that you see that they found that about 25% lost interest in pursuing an academic career. 15% were never interested, and 5% or so gained interest. And what's also been known through studies similar to this is that this trend continues as students continue to progress through graduate school. So as they get farther along in graduate school, more students begin to be less interested in an academic career path, and they begin to get interested in many other different career paths, which is reason number three why I believe graduate education should change to more broadly train PhD recipients. So this slide shows you the realities of the job market for PhD recipients in the biological, agricultural, and environmental sciences disciplines. And what you see is that 52% are employed in academia. But what I've already told you is that a pretty small fraction of that number are faculty. So if you see on the slide, 20% of this 52% total, which if you do the math, 20% of 52 is about 10%, are tenure track or tenured faculty members. In any given year, there's only about 10% new entrants into the faculty path, which goes back to the first slide I showed you. So that means that a big bulk of these PhD recipients are doing other jobs in academia other than being faculty. And that could be their research scientists or their professional staff of some sort. On the bottom part of the slide, you see that about 48% of PhDs are employed totally outside of academia. And they're employed in a variety of different job markets. About a quarter are in the industry settings, so this is pharmaceutical, biotech companies. About 10% are in nonprofit organizations, 10% are in government organizations, both federal and state, 3% are entrepreneurs, and what's not shown on this slide is that the unemployment rate for PhDs is about 2%, which is a little more than half of the national average unemployment rate. So PhDs are highly employable, and they're employable in a variety of different job sectors, much of which, or at least almost half of which, are totally outside of academia. Again, totally outside of the faculty career path that the majority of our PhD programs are lean toward training their doctoral recipients. What's also interesting is that if you ask PhDs in these non-academic careers, they're extracting great value out of these different career paths. They have great satisfaction, they're doing well financially, they're also contributing greatly to their employers, providing great value to their employers, both from a knowledge and innovation standpoint. But what you also find is that many of them early on are very frustrated about pursuing careers outside of academia. They feel that they haven't been trained appropriately, and they find that it's very difficult to transition into these non-academic careers because non-academic employers see them as academicians much more so than a non-academic professional, which is the third reason why I believe we should change graduate education. So the paradigm that I believe we should change to goes something like this. So I believe that, so what I'm going to say, I believe should be added as a complement to much of what we already do. Much of what we already do for PhD trainees is that we have them focus heavily on discipline-specific coursework. They have to complete a research project that will eventually contribute novel and original research to the literature, and I believe that we should still do all those things. But what I believe we should do in addition to that is use the PhD program as a hub for selecting the career that the person is most interested in, and then providing mechanisms by which these individuals can gain the most relevant training and expertise to pursue that career path in the most easiest way and contribute most effectively and immediately within those career paths. So let's take a graduate student that comes in their first year, and perhaps they're interested in a couple different career paths. Maybe they're interested in science policy, science communication, or working in the nonprofit sector. I think we should provide them opportunities to explore those career paths. We should provide career development resources for them to understand what those career paths entail in terms of the work that's done and in terms of the skills that are required to pursue those career paths. And then as they progress through graduate education, I think that we should provide them an opportunity to gain work experience that will allow them to develop the discipline-specific and job-specific knowledge and skills needed to excel in that career and to transition into that career path as easily as possible. So how will we do this? So in my mind, to do this, I think institutions and trainees have separate responsibilities. And by institutions, I mean universities in general, colleges, departments, and individual faculty members is sort of what I mean by institutions. So the first thing I think we need to do is we need to work more toward establishing an accepting and supportive culture for allowing trainees to explore and eventually pursue non-academic career paths. So if you ask a PhD, many PhDs who have transitioned outside of academia, you'll hear stories about how they didn't feel supported by the institution, or by their department, their college, or their mentor, some combination thereof, in pursuing a non-academic career path. There's a variety of different reasons for that, but I think we need to change that culture and be a more supportive environment. Secondly, I think institutions need to work on investing in career development infrastructure. The graduate school here is a great resource. We are like many different institutions in that our graduate school doesn't have enough resources to provide the career development aspects that a trainee needs to fully understand the breadth and depth of their career opportunities, their career choices, and to plan and take action appropriately to pursue those career choices. Thirdly, going back to my idea that we need to have trainees gain work experience, institutions need to do a much better job making connections with employers such that trainees can more easily work in real-world work environments to gain the real-world work experience that they need to transition into the career path of their interest. So now what do trainees need to do? So trainees, I believe, need to first better understand the realities of the job market. So as a trainee, when I was a trainee, I had no clue what the trainees or what the PhD job market looked like. I had no idea that relatively few PhDs get faculty positions, and I think the bulk of my cohort of fellow trainees had no clue either. And that's still the case today, I believe, that most trainees have no clue what the job market looks like. I think that understanding what the job market looks like allows trainees to have a better understanding of what they can realistically do as a career, and it can allow them to better explore what they may really want to do. Second, I think that trainees need to identify and better leverage the resources that are available to them to develop an understanding of the career path that they want to pursue and to develop the skills needed to pursue those career paths. There's lots of opportunities here in our graduate school that trainees can leverage, and the overwhelming majority of trainees don't participate in those activities and take advantage of those resources. Thirdly, I think trainees need to acquire the skills that are required to pursue these non-academic careers. And lastly, and most importantly, something that encompasses each of the other three activities is trainees have to really take action on preparing for their own career. Too many times, and this was my case, graduate trainees go through graduate school on autopilot, not really thinking about their career path or what they need to do to get into a career path of interest. And so trainees need to be much more active in that process. They can't rely on their mentor or others to get them a job or to provide everything they need to get a job as they get ready to graduate and enter the workforce. So this idea of work experience, I think, is critical for the way I would like to see graduate education change to. Work experience is critical to gain the practical hands-on experience needed in any given job. There's a couple of reasons why that is. So people who participate in experiential learning as trainees, they gain job-specific technical and transferable skills. I'll talk more about transferable skills in the next slide. They establish critical professional connections. Your network, as probably most of you in this room knows, is critical to your career development. There's anecdotes out there that say that about 80% of jobs in today's job market are obtained through your network versus just cold call applications. So establishing networks through work experiences in the career path you want to pursue will greatly benefit a person's ability to matriculate into that career path. Lastly, gaining work experience in the career path you want to pursue generally increases your competitiveness on the job market. It boosts your resume. It seems obvious now, looking back on it, that employers want to hire people who have experience doing whatever it is that they're hiring for. This was a critical flaw of mine. So we don't have time to get into it, but I have a very interesting career path where I worked in academia, but off the faculty path for a number of years. And when I finished graduate school, I tried very, very hard to get a non-academic appointment, really outside of academia, and I failed miserably. I literally submitted over 100 applications and got 0 interviews, not even a phone call from all this. And I believe I made critical mistakes, some of which include not talking about any kind of skills that I might have that would apply to the non-academic career paths that I was applying to. And I think that, as I said earlier, employers just looked at me as an academic, really, and not really a professional. Whereas if I had gained work experience in some of these areas, I would have been able to show that I had some skills in these areas that were directly applicable to the jobs that I was applying for, but that just wasn't the case. So overall, I'm a big proponent of trainees gaining experiential learning experience during their education. So transferable skills are a big hot topic these days in education. So transferable skills, for anybody who hasn't heard of them, are skills that you obtain in one situation and that you can transfer to any other situation. So as students, and graduate students in particular, you learn lots of transferable skills. You learn how to communicate, you learn how to manage a project, manage your time, you learn leader-follower skills, you become a great critical, analytical thinker, problem solver, you can think strategically. These are all the kinds of skills that many employers, there's been several different studies of Fortune 500 companies, and these companies typically say these are the kinds of skills that they are most interested in their employees having, much more so than any discipline-specific skills that they may have. So say I was a biochemistry graduate student, they'd be much more interested in these skills more so than my biochemistry knowledge and skills. But what happens many times is that graduate students have no idea about transferable skills. That was my case. I'd never heard the word. And they certainly don't know how to talk about the skills that they acquired, how they acquired them in graduate school, and how they can use those skills in the workforce. And those 20 minutes flew by. Okay, so just a couple more slides. So let me end by telling you a couple things that I've done here at the university to try to help students, graduate students in particular, address some of these problems. So with the support of the graduate school in 2014, I developed a course called Preparing Future Faculty, which is a career development course that's geared specifically to enhancing the workforce readiness of trainees. And in this course, we do many of the things that I just talked about. So these are some of the major components of the course. I go through having students explore different career paths. Well, I first present to them much of the information I gave you at the first couple slides. The realities of the job market. It's eye-opening, they've never heard it, it's jaw-dropping, it's really interesting to watch them unpack that in their mind as they see that. And then I go through exercises where they explore different career paths, try to understand which ones they might be interested in. We talk about transferable skills. They do self-assessments on the skills that they have, and then they brainstorm what skills they may need relative to the career paths that they're interested in. And then we go through a number of other exercises where they talk to professionals in the career paths that they're interested in to gain further information about that career, but also to understand how to get into that career path. I have them do a mock job application where they identify a job that they're interested in, and then they create a resume and a cover letter with my help and how to do that using best practices. And then there's a significant amount of student engagement. Students come to this class in all different areas. I've had English majors, art history, all the way to engineering and pharmacy and college of medicine. It's amazing how much students will learn from each other just because of the different way that different disciplines think. So they learn from each other. I bring in guest speakers who are typically PhDs in a variety of different career paths, and they learn from those individuals as well in terms of how they navigated graduate school and their career path. Okay, just to summarize quickly, what I believe we should do is change the paradigm of graduate education, focus more on providing a connection with the training, with the reality of the job market, and the reality of the career paths that trainings will pursue. So institutions should establish a supportive culture, invest in career development, establish connections with employers. Trainees should better understand the job market, leverage the resources, acquire skills, and above all, take action and be actively involved in preparing for their career. With that, I'll end and pass the baton.
Thank you very much. I think my talk will be a little bit different from both of the other previous ones, and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to talk about when Stephen invited me to be a part of the panel, and was needing to come up with a title about something. I didn't know what I was going to be talking about, so I guess this will be a very introspective talk. I just turned 60 this month. It's always a good time to sort of look back and what have I done in my career and how did I get here? And so it'll be a personal talk, but then I really want to, in thinking about where I've been, the things I've done, what are some pieces of advice and key things that made a difference for me in my career. And I think that a lot of these things can be transferred into any career path. I'm an academician, but I've done a lot of other things, and some of the things I've done definitely can apply in any situation, and I think are definitely things that can cross generations. I have 2 millennial sons, and I do see differences. I haven't yet interacted a whole lot with the little kids, but it is very interesting to be hearing about how people have different ways of doing things. So wherever you go, there you are. I guess, well, we had John Kabat-Zinn's book sitting on the table when I was trying to figure this out, but I think and Buckaroo Banzai and Confucius have all been tied to something like this. But basically, I guess my bottom line is to know where you are, know yourself, and keep your eyes open for new opportunities and make the best of your current situation, which I think is perhaps what this might mean. So I've been in UK for 28 years. I came in 1989 as a new faculty member. My PhD is in biochemistry. I do research in molecular biology. And I see myself as a faculty member. And one of the main things that faculty members who do research they focus on is grants. So I got my first grant in '91, and was fortunate enough to get a number of successive grants. So those to me are important career milestones for what I was set up to do. Promotion and tenure, those are big milestones. I was promoted to associate professor and then to full professor. And really, those were goals. But I also started doing some leadership opportunities that came my way. Close about the time I was being promoted to full professor, I became a course director. So for one of our first year courses, about 60 to 80 students per year, coordination, it was fun, it was something new. I was elected to the UK Senate, so then moving from a sphere of college and departmental influence, you get to start seeing a wider array of issues. I was elected to our College of Medicine Faculty Council and served as president for a year. Again, seeing broader ranges of issues outside of my lab and what I was doing as a scientist and a teacher. And I guess I did well enough that I was elected to another term. So I'm currently serving on our faculty council. I took a number of leadership training opportunities that came my way. I was in the inaugural class of a Women in Science and Medicine leadership program that was put together starting in the College of Medicine. It's evolved over the years, and there are leadership training available campus-wide. And I learned some really key things here. Some things that applied very well, some that did not. One of which, if you take any kind of leadership programs, they talk about goal setting and where do you see yourself in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. Well, my goal is to be faculty, and I did that. I was successful, and I actually felt bad that I didn't have any other goals. I actually felt guilty as what's wrong with me. But I've been able to be successful in ways that didn't require me setting a goal 10 years out and working towards it. And that's by taking advantage of opportunities and making the most of them as they come. I did do the Gatton College Certificate in Business Administration. That's a one-semester evening program that I found very informative, just to sort of talk about things and get some vocabulary around larger issues that as a scientist sort of seemed sort of intuitive, but there's ways that you can name things, and once you name things, they seem a little more clear. And I also did the SEC Academic Leadership Development Program Fellow for a year. 4 of those per year are chosen, and again, that was very insightful. I learned a lot. So then, official appointments. In 2007, a friend of mine, he was a new faculty coming in at the time. Our kids grew up together, so connections are important. You never know where they're going to come back to help. Needed some help in the vice president for research office, and so I came on board 20%. He knew I sort of wanted to explore some opportunities. I was a full professor. I was a female full professor. There aren't very many of us. There aren't many women in upper leadership, so maybe I can make a difference there. So he brought me in, and I stayed until 2012, which is when I took a leave of absence from the university to move to Arlington, Virginia, and I worked for about a year and a half full-time and then another 6 months part-time for the National Science Foundation. I was a program director. All of my research funding has been from the National Science Foundation. I reviewed for them, and every time you have a review panel, they advertise this opportunity to come and actually be a program director there. I ran the reviews. I made funding recommendations. I talked to faculty that didn't get funded, offered advice. It was sort of the whole other side of things. I learned about this opportunity probably back around 1995, but it wasn't really until 2012 that I figured professionally and personally it was something I could do. It was wonderful. I was really scared to step up and do that, but it was a wonderful experience. When I came back, I rejoined the Vice President's office, and I'm now the Senior Associate Vice President for Research because I've been there a long time. I'm the institutional memory, which is a little scary at times, but and now actually do 70% of my effort there. So what have I learned? And I say from the long perspective, as you sort of turn 60, it's like, well, okay, I guess it's time to think about things. But I guess some of the things that have been important for me is to very much balance my personal and professional priorities, and those things change with time. When I was first here, focused on my science and my little kids. But as my science was sort of progressing and I could pick up some additional responsibilities, my kids move out on their own, you can actually do different things. But that balance is really important. I think it's very important to know yourself, and this is something that participating in leadership programs was very helpful to me because they make you sit down and think about things, and make you name things. For example, personality types. As a biochemist, I didn't realize you could classify personalities and know and predict ways people would interact. But Myers-Briggs is very helpful. There's lots of other programs that do that. But once you name things, I think that they sort of make sense to you, and you can see when you don't, when you're interacting with somebody and it doesn't seem to be clicking, you say, well, okay, so this is my way of doing things, that's their way of doing things, and maybe there's a way we can bridge this. I think it's important to know your strengths and weaknesses. And when you have weaknesses, you have the opportunities to find ways to practice those things that you maybe need some help in, or in fact you recognize people who have skills that you don't and recruit them for help. It's important to know your sphere of influence, and that is going to change over time. When I was a faculty member, new to the department, I knew what I had to do in my science and local teaching, and I didn't worry about things going on at the university level. That wasn't something I could influence. Focus on what you can do, on your influence, and do your best. And then as your situation changes, you gain wider sphere of influence. I was able to work at the Senate level, I was able to work at the college-wide level, at the vice president's level, I can see campus-wide. And things that I do can make a difference much more broadly. Seek advice from people you trust. We all talk about formal mentoring programs, and that's good, but I guess if I were pressed, I wouldn't be able to name many specific mentors. However, I did go sit in people's offices at various times when I needed advice on one thing or another, and that was always helpful. And then stay open to new opportunities. I did not plan to be Senior Associate Vice President for Research when I started out my career, but because of the way things that I was doing and opportunities that I had, it came that I was able to pick up some of these additional things that I've accomplished. Be sure that you have time to do your best in each task or commitment. We're often offered a wide variety of things to step up and do leadership things, whether it be professionally or personally in your church, your civic organization, your kids' school. Both my husband and I were very active volunteering and leading opportunities in our schools when our kids were young. But you have to make sure that you have enough time, and then this is where balance comes in. And it's important to know when to say yes and no. So if you're faced with an opportunity, is it in your area of interest? Do you have a passion for it? What is the scope or sphere of influence of that? Is that going to expand your connections and your influence? Will you learn something new from the opportunity? If it's something you've done a million times and you can do it, but you're not going to learn something new, then maybe that pass on that, let somebody else learn those skills. And then will you be developing new skills? And try new things even if they seem a stretch. I was really afraid to leave leave everything here in Lexington, move to Arlington, Virginia, in an apartment by myself. I realized I'd never lived by myself, ever. I always had roommates or a husband. So now I was in an apartment by myself, and I did just fine. I can cook my own food if I need to. Which I guess means that I'm a little bit spoiled because I don't always have to do that. And then this is my last slide of things that I think are important to say, is to name and stay true to your core values, whatever they are. Find a list, write them down, the things that are most important to you fundamentally, so that whatever you do, you feel like you can do it, and being true to yourself. I think core values cross generations. Maybe they talk about it in slightly different ways, but I think that people who have core values recognize those values in other people, and it's important for you as well as you in leadership roles. And then take the opportunity to mentor next generation. Other generations are going to be very different. From me as a baby boomer, I interact quite well with my millennial sons. We get along just fine. And some of the things I heard actually in the keynote on Monday, talking about these Generation Z, is that even though they do a lot of electronic tweets and texts, and I am pretty good at text, although I do spell my words out correctly. I don't use the little shorthand things. But is that they do need help in personal interactions. And even though they do like to get a lot of their content online, and that our emerging roles as teachers are to be more guides and ask the right questions for them to help figure out where they're supposed to be going, they still need that personal interaction, and that is becoming a preferred method for interacting. And then those of us who grew up with personal skills and expectations we really do have a lot to offer. So those were the things I was planning to say, and happy to answer any questions with the rest of my colleagues here.
Okay, let's thank Mark. We do have a few minutes for questions. If you have a question for David or Nathan or Martha, we will need both mics in order to pick up on the live stream. So, do we have any questions? All right. Yes.
Yeah, this is for you about sort of this mindset of going into academia as a faculty member versus going into a professional realm. And I was curious about, my question was, how are we teaching to new generations if people aren't interested or in going into academia? That's your choice, I suppose, but what about it with these new generations? I can see if they're not seeing it, how do I fit as an academic in the new institution, right? If they aren't seeing it while we're teaching it, while we're lecturing up there, if they aren't seeing it and they don't see themselves in it, then I see there being a huge drop in interest in going into academia. So what's your take on that?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but what I would say is an individual faculty member. So let me step back. So as I said in that hub slide, I do think that graduate education should remain very focused on training individuals very similar to the way we're training now, where they're very knowledgeable of their discipline, they conduct research that contributes to the literature. What individual faculty members who are teaching those discipline-specific courses and that are running research programs, training students in this research discipline, what I think they should do is be supportive and be verbally supportive of and acknowledge that there are a variety of different career paths that students could be interested in. Have conversations with students about what they're interested in, and help them with network opportunities to connect them with opportunities that can help them in that regard. I think that's the greatest thing that individual faculty members can do. If you're in a leadership role, then I think you have more responsibilities. If you're chair or dean, but individual faculty, does that answer your question?
Well, I guess I didn't ask it really very clearly. So, and so I'll take responsibility for that. I think when we have Gen Z and they're going into academia and maybe they go on and they want to get their PhD in something, but the way we're teaching them, right? If we're all teaching Gen Z into their PhDs in 6 years, right? Okay, they're entering now and they're starting their PhD. And we're doing it the way we were taught, right? The way we went through our PhD. Are we going to have future academicians because they're like, well, this sucks, this doesn't talk to me, this isn't interesting, this isn't the way I think or the way the world is in my perspective. So I'm just kind of curious, how do you see the university or any university really ramping up so that we can have a great supply of new academicians, people who are interested in teaching and being faculty members, but if they aren't seeing it while they're going through their program and they don't see themselves in it. So I just wonder if there's going to be a big gap here in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, so maybe teaching styles is kind of along the lines.
Yeah, well, addressing this whole notion of teaching to our generations, what's going to keep Gen Z interested in becoming or being involved at an academic institution.
Yeah, you may have a better answer for this than me, but I think there's all new types of teaching styles. There's the flipped classroom, more interactiveness that I think is more in line with younger generations. I think it's going to take those kinds of things to keep students interested and engaged, much more so than your standard lecture, which, at the undergraduate level and at the med school level, they're doing more flipped classrooms and interactive things. But in graduate education, most places are still doing the sort of old-fashioned way of doing things. So I think that graduate education faculty need to get more into the newer teaching styles that will better engage students. Do you have?
I would agree with Nathan. One of the things that we find with the kids now, especially with our high school kids, is the dependency on authenticity and exposure to what's out there. And much like what you're talking about, that pathways approach, we're very much heading that way in secondary education. That we're establishing academies or pathway type settings to give our students exposures to what's out there. And that experience is critical. And I think one of the things that will prove to be very, very helpful is as we adjust our teaching styles, and that's something we've had to do. It's been a struggle. It's challenging because the kids are adapting so quickly, and we're not as educators. For academia, and I've got 2 nephews, both who are in academia. One is at North Dakota State as an evolutionary biologist. When he got his doctoral degree, I think you're dead on. When he graduated, he had no clue about what was out there or how to pursue what was out there. So it really is a matter of, okay, just because I was taught this way, and I learned this way, and I was good at it, that may not be the best way for the kids coming in through the system. And that's one thing that we see a lot of is, when I deal with my teachers, every one of them was successful in their academic programs. They were good at it. And because they were good at it, they want to emulate that. But the kids coming through the systems now are very different. And so they respond differently to that traditional type approach that lacks the creativity, that they so much want to just include in their structure. So I think part of the key is like, okay, let's look at our programs. And yes, there's absolute value in some of the traditions we have. However, the approaches of how we have those kids acquire their knowledge and use that knowledge, now it goes to much more authentic. Why are we doing this? You know, the hashtag, what we be doing. Yeah, that just kind of hit me. It's like, boom. I never thought about it. No, of course, I told the teacher I want to change the hashtag, what we be learning. Because it's really is about learning, it's not about doing. But be it as it may, I think that's why I really like the pathways. And the exposures to multiple kind of things out there.
So I'm very sorry, the next session actually starts at 10, which is just a few minutes away. So first, please join me in thanking our speakers today. I hope that the speakers will hang out a little bit outside there in case anyone has any particular questions. But also, I'd like to invite everyone to stay, because the next session is on mentoring across generations, which is very important to all of us. And then I'd just like to thank you all